We start off episode 9 at the Mystery Fair, according to Grunkle Stan, the cheapest fair money can rent, and already see how cheap it is when Dipper crashes down right next to Grunkle Stan and Mabel, exclaiming that he basically just broke every bone in his body. Of course, to keep it even more shady, Grunkle Stan sends the twins out to put up some fake safety inspection certificates around the fair. After making sure the dunk tank that Stan is going to be sitting in when the fair starts is properly rigged, Suze explains that it would probably need a futuristic laser arm cannon to actually knock down Stan while he's hunkered down in there. Which, all of you probably already guessed, is some more foreshadowing for the theme of the episode. After Stan also tells Suze that somehow his screwdriver went missing, we get a view of the character that is going to be very prominent in this episode, which we've actually already seen, and who I already mentioned in earlier episodes. It's a time traveler. So this episode is all about the time traveler or time travel in general. After Dipper is finished fawning over Wendy again and praising Mabel's advice to just be himself, we got douchebag McGee coming back into the picture, this time with squeaky jeans. Like very squeaky jeans. And I repeat, it's jeans. Not latex or something. His jeans are squeaking. How that would be even possible with something that's made out of fabric? I don't know, but they are. After knockoff Adam Driver takes his leave, Mabel loses her marbles over the fact that she can win a pig at a guessing contest. She has to guess the weight of the pig, and of course she wins the pig because the dude at the pen introduces the pig as old 15-poundy. I mean, that's not a very hard thing to guess the weight if it's old 15-poundy, but well. Naturally, where there's a Mabel, there's also a Pacifica strutting around with no one in her company. Definitely not the friends again, which I already called out for not being prominent characters at all. So don't worry about that. The whole debacle of the episode starts when Dipper tries to win an unidentifiable plush animal for Wendy, hitting her in the eye with a ball he threw because it bounced off the table, which leads to him running to get some ice, running back, and slamming right into Blendon, dropping the bag of ice, which scatters all over the floor, and Blendon loses a little device looking like a tape measure, which we will see in a few minutes again. And when Dipper gets back to Wendy, Mr. My Chemical Romance already presses an ice cone to her eye to ease the pain and uses the situation to ask her to go out with him, which she actually accepts, leaving Dipper there heartbroken. And apparently them running into the tunnel of love and corn dogs also seems to freeze people in time. So completely ordinary stuff. After Dipper drowned himself enough in self-loathing, he's ready to tell Mabel what actually happened. And when he sees Blendon near them, he actually blames him for ruining his life, which seems a bit over the top. I mean, yeah, heartbreak and stuff, but the bro's 12. There's a lot of life ahead of him. And for some reason, Mabel decides to ask him why he's bald. And I think there's no need to shame him for being bald. That's a bit rude, Mabel. A bit rude. When Blendon tries to wipe Mabel's memory with so-called memory wipes, which are actually just regular baby wipes, we get a little Dipper Uwu fingertips moment, and then it is revealed to the twins as well that he's a time traveler, which the twins, of course, don't really believe. So he promptly travels through time and comes back with some medieval clothes, which aren't actually that medieval because he says that there was a costume store right there at the spot where he was standing. And he says the store was there 15 years ago, but judging by a flashback that we get later in the episode, which shows us the clearing with a house on it, there couldn't really have been a costume store 15 years ago. It doesn't seem like a likely timeline, again, going off the scene that we get to see later in the episode. And I already called him by his name throughout the episode, but now we actually get to see his name on his ID, and he is, as he explains, a time traveler called Blendon from 2012, And he's actually voiced by Justin Roiland, the same guy who voiced Lemon Grab from Adventure Time and Rick and Morty from Rick and Morty, just to name a few. He explains to the twins that he's there to stop some time anomalies that are supposed to be occurring around that place. Dipper gets the bright idea to go back in time using Blendon's time measuring tape to fix the mistake he made while throwing the ball. Because Blendon, of course, doesn't want to give away his tape measure, they have to trick him into going onto one of the attractions at the fair, where he has to lay down the belt he's wearing with a tape measure on it. That way they can get their grubby little hands on it without him noticing. Mabel, of course, being the more reasonable person of the two, suggests that they should go back in time and get two dodos and force them to make out with each other, which, as you can see by the screenshot, S&P didn't really like that statement, but they got convinced in the end to keep it in anyways. When the twins start their little time-traveling adventure and the playing cards fly off the table, the backside of the cards is actually visible, which displays a little tiny Bill, who's a character that we will meet in later episodes, and I'm pretty sure you're going to like him because he's a very nice guy and always tries to help people out. Okay, so the twins just arrived after their time travel journey, and this little fella here really looks like a Dipper body double, because the twins want to relive their day. Mabel is of course going to go back to the pig pen to win the old 15-poundy again. And in the background, on the tree, you can see a little, let's call it a hatch, which actually looks a bit like the hatch that covered the mechanism where Dipper found the journal in episode 1. So it either could be that, a hatch covering another mechanism, or it could just be a little board where the flyers that you can see hanging around were pinned to, instead of pinning them directly to the tree. As you can expect, the plan that Dipper had didn't really work out. Wendy still got hit with a ball right in the eye, but of course he doesn't give up. And so we get a little compilation of Mabel winning waddles and Dipper choking over and over again. After failing a bunch of times, Dipper decides to write down a little equation to get a grasp on what is going wrong with his throw, and he comes to the conclusion that the only variable that is always the same is that Mabel isn't there to help him land the throw. And just a short note, I thought about explaining or trying to explain the equation that he wrote down, but frankly, I think with such a long equation, it would take, not even considering if the equation is solvable at all. So maybe I will put out a smaller episode at the end of the whole Mysteries of Gravity Falls series, where I just explain what's happening in the equation, but don't count on it. That probably won't happen unless the little ADHD gnome in my brain decides I should do it. And yes, I know Dipper is 12 years old and he can put up such an equation, it shouldn't take me this long. Yes, but he's also a fictional character who just traveled through time, so just settle down. And of course, as soon as Mabel helps him, he lands the throw. And by the way, Rube Goldberg would be absolutely proud of this one. Probably. It turns out that Dipper was right with his idea, that Mabel was the missing variable, and with her help he wins the prize for Wendy without hurting her, and simultaneously gets to deny Robbie his chance to ask Wendy out. Sadly for Mabel, this actually came with a price she had to pay, and that is losing her chance to win Waddles again, who is now being dragged away by Pacifica. After hysterically screaming and running at Dipper, she tells him what happened and wants to turn back time to actually fix this mistake, but Dipper isn't quite keen to follow through with his idea, because that would mean that he would lose Wendy again. And after fighting over the time-traveling tape measurer, they fall, the tape gets stuck in the nearest corn dog cart, and when it releases, they get transported back in time. Naturally, they had to take the opportunity and make the joke of asking, when are we? Instead of, where are we? And after nearly getting trampled by a horde of bison, and miraculously surviving a fall of a cliff into a covered wagon, they discover that they are on the Oregon Trail sometime in the 1800s. That is a fucked up looking horse. The dude in the front who steers the wagon thinks that the twins are actually 2 more children that his wife just gave birth to, even though they are wearing clothes. His wife's name, by the way, is Fertilia. He also says "by Trembly" when he first spots them, which, as you probably already guessed, is a reference to the good old Sir Lord Quentin Tremblay III Esquire. When Mabel gets mad that Dipper tells her not to mess with time, after retorting that he already did that himself, she gives one of the boys a calculator. Why she had that at all, I don't know. And then the boy presses some buttons on it, and for a few seconds, when Dipper takes the calculator away from him, you can see that it actually says 666. Ooh, spooky number. Apparently, they also already had adhesive bandages in the 1800s, which of course isn't the case. The adhesive bandage was invented around 1920, so maybe someone already messed with the past. Or a different timeline where the twins went there and maybe they gave the travelers adhesive bandages? Just throwing out some theories. When they do finally decide to leave, they stop by the set for A Land Before Time and then continue into the future where they see a giant floating baby taking over the world, which was actually mentioned in the paper in the last episode. So we got some good old continuity going on. And after coming back from the future, they stand by the lake that we saw in the second episode, The Legend of the Gobblewonker, and they continue to run through a few episodes, 3 in fact, and we will get into the nitty-gritty at the end of the episode. But we make a short stop in episode 3, Headhunters, in the scene where Stan displays his magnificent, waxy self, I suppose. And when we look at the stage, we should be able to see Mabel, but we don't. So for some reason, she's missing there. And when traveling the next time, they end up at a cabin that is completely covered in snow, which awfully looks like the Mystery Shack, but a little bit younger and a little bit less tourist trappy. And when the time travel tape measure nearly blows up in their faces and takes them away, we get a short glimpse at someone who opens the door who really looks like a younger version of Stan. Getting back to the twins, we now get the classic cartoony only the eyes are visible joke. Dipper thinks they ended up in basically nothingness, but it turns out they just wound up in the porta potty on the mystery fair. And after discovering that they are in the timeline where Dipper actually managed to get the plush toy for Wendy, Mabel tries to still get the tape measure from Dipper. Dipper says he won't give it back, and she starts sulking and actually crying and hitting her head against the totem that's standing nearby. Dipper says that she'll be forgetting about it in about a day, and trying to prove that to her, he actually travels over a month into the future and she's still standing at the totem pole, hitting her head against it, now also covered in vines because she didn't move for the whole month. And frankly, I don't know how she's still alive after a month, probably without eating or drinking, if she didn't move at all. Maybe she drank some rainwater and ate some flies or something. Dipper eventually folds though, and gives her the opportunity to win Waddles again. Thus, of course, giving up his chance to get Wendy the plush. When Blinden finally finds them and takes away the tape measurer, he is not amused about them traveling through time like that. But the twins, again, don't really have to face any repercussions because Blinden gets taken away by the Time Paradox Avoidance Enforcement Squadron. And he's also screaming that Waddles is actually their leader, which opens up a whole new can of worms because he seems really adamant that Waddles is the leader, and maybe he knows some stuff about Waddles that's happening in the future that we don't know about. Without it being a big surprise, with the foreshadowing happening in the intro of the episode. One of the guys, after getting insulted by Stan, fires his laser at the dunk tank and finally takes down Stan. But in the end, it wouldn't really be a Gravity Falls episode if we didn't get some kind of retribution for Dipper. So Mabel sends Waddles at Robbie, who gets scared away by the pig, runs into a conveniently placed pot of hot water, and the hot water shrinks his pants, basically forcing him to drop to the floor. And that is why you don't wear insanely tight pants. F to its gonads, though. Oh, and one last thing before we get to the stuff that the twins dropped throughout the timeline. Couldn't have Dipper just told Wendy to cover her eyes with her arms? Wouldn't that have worked because the ball couldn't have hit her? Or would that fall under the fact that basically the outcome would never have changed if Mabel wasn't there to help? So maybe her arms would have been flung up and then the ball would have hit her in the eye. You can gladly tell me what you think about that in the comments. And now we actually get to Blendon picking up all the stuff throughout the episodes. The first thing he picks up is from episode 2, as I already mentioned, the calculator, and that is actually what he picks up in the episode. But in the third episode, he should pick up a shoe, which he does in the original episode, but in this credit scene, he seems to pick up another calculator, so a little bit of a mishap there. And those two I actually saw and mentioned in the respective episodes, but the last thing we get to see Blendon pick up is from the first episode, and that one I didn't catch. And we also can't really see him pick up Mabel's hairpin in the first episode, because he's mostly hidden behind the bushes. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mysteries of Gravity Falls. This is one of those episodes again where it's a bit more story, and I didn't find that much to actually analyze a bit deeper, but those episodes come and go. That's just how it is. Still hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next episode. Until then, see ya!